Yeah, we're gonna start now.
Okay.
Turks, TYT, yeah, Turks, TYT, yeah, Turks, TYT, yeah,
Welcome, Turks. Cenk. Let me tell you something. I got to be honest with you. Those days where it's worth the price of admission. I'm going to earn my fairly small pay from the Young Turks today. The stuff that I'm about to show you, you absolutely positively have to see. And honestly, I'm not even sure anybody else is going to put it together like this, okay? Now, I don't want to overhype it, but at the same time, the reason I'm so excited about, and what it is data, and I'm going to show you facts. I'm not going to be like, oh, this is my opinion, right? When you see it like this, you'll see how politics works, and you'll see exactly what the American people think, what the Democratic Party thinks, what the Republican Party thinks, and how our politics works. So, with that significant hype, let's get started on what it is. First of all, we have a number of awesome polls out now. Now, look, this is really important because we live in a democracy, and this gives you a pretty good sense of where the American people are. First, there was an NBC News Wall Street Journal poll, and the numbers are unbelievable simply because it's almost as if I wrote the results. Okay, it's exactly what I've been telling you all throughout all of these years, right? And it confirms other polls. Part of the reason I was telling you that is because I saw the other polls that no one else in media talks about. So first, on the current issue on bargaining rights, they say collective bargaining for public employees, should it be the same as private unions? Absolutely, 77 to 19%, no doubt about it. Now, the more interesting numbers. When they said, all right, look, we got to cut spending and we have to balance the budget. That's the assumptions going in. So they asked the American people, how would you do it? Well, their answers are very, very clear. First, what they will not cut. And by the way, they do balance the budget. I'm going to explain that in a second. But this is the American people's priorities. What they find unacceptable in cuts. Number one on the list, Social Security. 77% saying unacceptable. Number two, actually a tie for first, is K through 12 education. Also, don't cut education, 77%. Use the word unacceptable. Medicare, 76%. Medicaid, 67%. I'm going in order of priority here. I am not skipping around. Social Security, education, Medicare, Medicaid. Then you go to heating assistance to low-income families, 65%. College student loans, 59%. Head Start pre-kindergarten program, 56%. Unemployment insurance, 55%. All saying these are unacceptable to cut in the exact order almost that they are being cut. And they're going to get back to Social Security and Medicare in a second. But Haley Barbour and a lot of the Republicans talking about cutting Medicaid. Even President Obama has agreed immediately to start cutting heating assistance to low-income families, college student loans, education, etc. Governor Walker in Wisconsin cutting education. So it's exactly what Washington wants to cut and exactly what the American people don't want to cut. Now, when they ask him, well, how do you balance the budget? The American people have an answer. Again, NBC News, Wall Street Journal poll, Wall Street Journal, owned by Rupert Murdoch. Okay, so how would you raise money or cut the deficit? Well, number one, place a surtax on federal income taxes for people earning over $1 million. In other words, raise taxes on the rich. 81% agree. 81%. Okay. And then number two, cut earmarks at 78%. Good. A lot of Republicans agree to that. A lot of Democrats agree to that. I agree to that. Fantastic. Number three, cut defense. Again, in Washington, they can't possibly consider cutting defense. 76% of the American people saying cut defense. Then eliminate tax credits for oil and gas industries, coming in at 74%. Exactly what we've been telling you. And finally, phasing out the Bush tax cuts for people making over $250,000 comes in at 68% and is the fifth most popular thing to do. Like I said, it's as if the Young Turks said, okay, here are our priorities, and the American people agreed exactly, or we agree with the American people, any way you slice it. And I keep telling you, sometimes people come up to me and say, you know, you're actually a moderate. I know that. I'm exactly where the country's at. So now that's poll number one, and it's awesome, and it shows you exactly where we should be going. And unfortunately, our politicians are not going in that direction. Poll number two, and by the way, I'm giving you the two best examples. Poll after poll has been coming in saying the same exact thing. I've showed it 100 times here on the Young Turks, 100 times on MSNBC. Okay, so now this one is great. It's called Program for Public Consultation. That's the group that ordered the poll. The people who did it is a firm called Knowledge Networks. Polls before. They had a good wide representative sample, and they did something very interesting. They played a game where they said, hey, listen, how would you balance the budget here? And they gave them a great number of factors, right? So it wasn't just like, hey, should we cut Social Security or should we raise taxes? They said, you do it any way you like and see the number that you come up with for the budget. That's fantastic, right? So they get to be their own legislators. And then, of course, they take some time with this. And then the results are awesome, overwhelming, and I need you to know them. First, the public said that they would primarily cut defense spending as their top priority. Very similar to the poll we just told you about. Second of all, they would do progressive taxes on the rich. The country is liberal. When you ask them, how do you balance the budget? Cut defense, taxes on the rich. And at the same time, by the way, they would increase spending in some places, including job training, higher education, and humanitarian aid. The things that they are surprised by in this poll is how little we spend in reality in humanitarian aid. At the end, they say, well, here's the real budget. Or, I'm sorry, in the beginning, so that they can play around with the numbers. And they go, that's all we spend on humanitarian aid? Oh, my God. The number one thing they said is, that's how much we spend on defense? That's way too much. And I don't even know if they give them the context of how much other countries spend. We way overspend compared to the other countries. Coming in at number two is China. They're nowhere near us, right? So they go to work, and you know what happens at the end? The American people actually not only balance the budget, but they do much deeper cuts and balance the budget much more effectively than not only just Washington, D.C., but way more than the Republicans, okay? You know why? Because the Republicans in D.C. who are like, oh, we're going to balance it, we're going to cut spending. No, they don't want to cut spending to defense. They don't want to cut spending to the oil companies, et cetera, which the American people have no problem doing. And they refuse to raise taxes. So the actual Republicans, politicians in D.C. do terrible in this, right? So now, here comes the extra twist, which is fantastic. 4 different categories of people here according to their politics: Tea Party, Republican, Democrat, and Independent. Now, you want to guess who did the best and who did the worst in balancing the budget? The group that did the absolute worst was the Tea Party. Number one, because they refused to raise taxes, they just couldn't balance the budget. And number two, and this is the part I did not expect, they were the very worst at cutting spending. They just couldn't find a way to cut, even on the programs that, you know, everybody else likes too. They're like, oh, I don't really want to cut that. So they came in dead last. Number two, worst at balancing the budget among this study group, Republicans. Number three, Democrats. The very best at cutting, independents. You know why? Independents raised taxes a hell of a lot more than Republicans did, to the tune of $300 billion more in this exercise, and they cut spending more than the Democrats did at $200 billion. So they did more than an adequate job of balancing the budget. See, if you leave it up to the American people, your budget can be balanced, and you can have the right priorities. You can have the right priorities in terms of, you know, cutting spending and raising taxes. All right, now when we come back, I'm going to tell you what they're actually doing in D.C. That's the second part of earning our pay here. Let's come right back. All right, back on the Young Turks. So in the last segment, we told you about how the polls are incredibly clear. The country is, in fact, liberal. You can call them moderate. You can call them whatever you like, but they're nowhere near Washington. They say cut defense spending, raise taxes on the rich, and you can actually balance the budget. So their priorities are in exactly the right place. The problem is that is not the priorities of the Republican Party. So with the numbers coming in so overwhelming across the country, they're in a bit of a tight spot. And in fact, one of the pollsters was a Republican. His name is McInturf, and he is with the Wall Street Journal and NBC News poll, Bill McInturf. And when he looked at the numbers, he said it is a huge flashing yellow sign for Republicans. Slow down, you're going the wrong way, right? Asked, why do you think they're going the wrong way? He had this devastating quote. He said, quote, "It may be hard to understand why someone would try to jump off a cliff, unless you understand that they are being chased by a tiger, and that tiger is the Tea Party." And that's exactly right. So now let's talk about how the Republicans are in a uniquely bad situation. So they've got the American people saying, don't be this extreme, we don't like your priorities. On the other side, you have the Tea Party. For example, Judson Phillips, he's the leader of Tea Party Nation. And he's already saying, that's it, I'm done with John Boehner. He said the $61 billion in cuts that he proposed is not nearly enough, and I don't want him to negotiate away $1 of that. In fact, he called Boehner a fool. Then he went on to say this colorful quote, "Charlie Sheen is now making more sense than John Boehner." So he doesn't like John Boehner, thinks he's way too soft. And then Politico reports that Phillips also called for, quote, "a candidate to run against John Boehner in 2012 and should to defeat in a primary the sitting Speaker of the House of Representatives." So this is their leader in the House, the Republican leader in the House. And the Tea Party says, not nearly extreme enough. We should primary him, not for the seat of Speaker of the House, not challenging him for that, but actually take him down and remove him from Congress. So he's stuck. What's he going to do? On the one side, he's got the Tea Party, and they're like, cut, 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 cut. And on the other side is the American people saying, no, we don't like those priorities. So they go into the negotiating room, and of course, they just sit there, and so the president has an awesome opportunity. All he has to do is let them destroy themselves, right? Now, if you care about the policies, you have to care a little bit about the politics, because the right politics can lead to right policy. So if you're an advisor to the president, you would say, let them, destroy themselves. The people are on your side, demand on your priorities, and you'll be all set. You almost can't lose, right? So they're given this great gift, and how do you think the White House responds? Now, if you've been watching this show for a while, you know exactly what's coming. First of all, let me break it down for you, and this is amazing. Before the negotiations began, what did the White House do? They immediately gave enormous concessions. So what the Republicans said is that they wanted to cut basically $100 billion. From that baseline, President Obama came out and said, I'm going to freeze spending for 5 years. I'm going to freeze federal employee pay. I'm going to do this, this, and this. And he said, look, here are $40 billion in concessions. So he's almost met them halfway already, and the negotiations have not begun. Now, what did the Republicans do in response? They said, fantastic. The new baseline is after your first set of cuts. So now you've got to meet us. Well, first of all, they don't even care about halfway, but they're saying you're starting at ground zero now. What? And Obama's surprised by this. Why are you surprised? We told you a million times. Stop giving away stuff before the negotiations. So they go to sit down in the negotiations. Now, anybody want to guess who gave the first compromise offer? Of course, it was Obama's team. They said, all right. We'll give you $6 billion more. But you know what? That's $6 billion on top of the $4 billion that they already promised in the 2-week extension. Remember, they had this deadlock a couple of days ago, and the Republicans said, all right, we'll give you 2 more weeks to extend the government so the government's not shut down, but you have to give us all of the $4 billion we want in those 2 weeks in terms of cuts. And there was no negotiation. Of course, the Obama administration gave them all $4 billion. Now they're giving them another $6 billion, so they're already at $50 billion worth of cuts, exactly at halfway between what the Republicans said they wanted and initially what the Democratic proposal was. So what do the Republicans say? Not good enough. Of course! What is the Republican counterproposal? Nothing. No counterproposal, no compromise, no negotiation. And they're 100% right. You know why? Tactically speaking, politically speaking. All you have to do is sit there and let Obama keep playing against himself. They're like, man, we thought we were nearly a checkmate, but this guy keeps giving us the store. He's giving me his bishop, his knight, and now he's offering me his queen. He's like, all right, I'm going to let him do it. so McConnell and Boehner are right. Just let Obama keep punching himself in the face. All right, you're still not convinced? I'll give you the quotes. Here's Gene Sperling. He is the top economic advisor for the White House, okay? When they asked him, hey, listen, how are you doing so far? And he says, he brags, he says, it is clear that we can meet them halfway. So he's like, I'm coming towards them. They don't have to move, right? Then they said, all right, well, you've already given $50 billion in cuts. Is that good enough? What's your stance now? He said, quote, we have made it clear that we are committed to doing that, and we are willing to cut further if we can find common ground on the budget with reducing spending in the right way while protecting our investments in education, innovation, and research. Did you hear the critical part there? He said, we gave all these cuts, and quote, let me give it to you again, we are willing to cut further. The world's worst poker players. But the thing is, by now you've caught on. Nobody can be this bad. The only way that you can be this bad at this is if you want to lose. Okay? When they asked Sperling, hey, what are the other cuts that you might agree to? What else is on the chopping block? He said, quote, stay tuned. No, come on, you can't be this dense. Okay, a negotiation. Let's say it's management and labor, right? And I'm management, and labor is, sitting on the other side. And I say, or labor, it doesn't matter. Take any negotiation, any side. If I'm on one side of a negotiation, I keep saying, hey, I'm going to give in more. But you know what? Just stay there. Don't move. I promise that I will give more and more concessions as things go along. What would the other side do? If they were management, they were labor, they were Republicans, they were there. Doesn't matter. You sit there and you go, okay, fine, give me more. Okay, come on. I'm asking you. They can't be this bad at negotiation. Nobody can be this dense. See, I'm afraid what we have is Harlem Globetrotters versus Washington Generals. And the Democrats are paid to be the guys who take the hit, the Washington Generals, to go out there and lose, and so that the troops are entertained, okay? And the fans come for a good show. It's all fake drama. The end result is what you don't want, right? The polls are clear. You say cut defense, raise taxes on the rich. Do not cut these vital programs. The final conclusion is going to be the exact opposite. They're not going to cut defense. They're going to cut taxes on the rich, which they already did. And they're going to cut all those critical programs you said you don't want cut. Now, why? Because we've lost control of the system. It's not really a democracy anymore. You see, they don't represent you. I keep telling you this, and I hate to tell you, but you can see it here. You can see it with your own eyes. They represent the people who got them elected, and the people who got them elected are the people who fund their campaigns. For example, who funds their campaigns? The defense contractors. Huge amount of money to politicians. So, gee, I wonder why they're not going to cut defense, even though the whole country tells them to. It's because they get paid by the defense contractors. Gee, I wonder why they're not going to take away $46 billion in oil subsidies. Yesterday, I looked into those programs more. You might think like, oh, maybe it's subsidies to do the right things like green energy, et cetera. No, it's subsidies to encourage them to drill for oil. They're the most profitable companies in the world because they drill for oil. You don't have to give them an extra incentive. The oil's at $100 a barrel. There's no need for any incentives. They're just taking $46 billion out of our pocket and giving it to the oil companies. Why? It actually makes sense. Because the oil companies run their ads, pay their bills, and get them elected. You see how the system is set up all wrong? So when you're not waiting for the Democrats to ride to the rescue, well, it's not going to happen. They get paid by the same guys. They just get paid for a different role. Their role is to lose and be like, oh my God, I didn't know. You mean to tell me I shouldn't have given away everything before the negotiations? They know. That's the bad thing. So what will happen at the end of these negotiations, even though if you cared about winning, the Democrats could easily destroy the Republicans by simply demanding what the American people demand, and putting them in that untenable spot where they're stuck between the Tea Party and the American people. Instead, they will play the only way they can to lose the game, which is to say, okay, Republicans, we will agree with your bad priorities that the American people hate, And you could then later blame us for those, which is a tactic that the Republicans use all the time. You voted for the Iraq war. We pressured you into it. Too bad. I'm going to say, look at that. John Kerry voted for it. Hillary Clinton voted for it. It's their fault. We've shown you this tactic a million times. Now, how stupid can you possibly be to fall for that tactic again? They're not stupid. They're paid to be the Washington Generals. They're paid to lose. All right, how's that for depressing? Woohoo! Listen, what am I going to do? I got to tell you what the reality is. That's right. And look, one of the things that I do, so that you know I'm not a Monday morning quarterback, is I try to, it's not to be like, hey, bragging, et cetera, I told you so. I tell you how things are going to unfold, and I do so-called predictions, et cetera, so that you can learn to decipher this for yourself. So you can see how the political game is played and see what the result's going to be. So these negotiations they're having with the Republicans and the Democrats, clearly the right political move for the Democrats would be to not compromise in this case. And it is a guarantee that they will compromise. Clearly, they shouldn't go more than halfway in meeting the Republicans. I don't think they should go any other way. But clearly, by any stretch of the imagination, they should not go more than halfway. They'll go way more than halfway. So, and my guess is now that the Republicans are saying the first $40 billion didn't count, they'll get at least another $30 billion in cuts from the Democrats. So in the end, the cuts will be $70 billion, at least, okay? And then, even then, the Tea Party won't be satisfied, but the Democrats will give in because Obama wants to be likable. And among the other reasons that I stated to you. Okay, now, in the midst of all this, let me give you one more story along these lines, okay? So as I'm telling you about how this system works, and the Democrats are the guys who are supposed to agree with the Republicans and pretend that they got their arm twisted, be like, oh, tax cuts for the rich. Oh, what am I going to do? Okay, you win. Well, they've actually formed an official group in the Senate to do that. They're calling themselves the Moderate Dems, very clever title. You know, as I've been telling you, if you hear moderate Democrat or centrist Democrat these days, grab your wallet because they're about to rob you blind. They're going to do it with the Republicans, and they're going to set out to agree with them. In fact, this group says our whole point is to cut spending and agree with the Republicans. Fantastic! Then why don't you just become a Republican? Why? Because that would be a less effective way of tricking the American people into thinking. This way they say, oh, look, it was compromise. It was bipartisan. It was Democrats agreeing with Republicans. That's a lot more convincing than Republicans just saying we want it, right? So the three people leading the group are Senators Tom Carper, Mark Udall, and Kay Hagan. They've got 18 people in this group. 18 Democrats are plenty enough Democrats to side with the Republicans to give the Republicans every single thing they want. So if you had any hope that the Democrats in the Senate would hold up the Republican agenda, you can now put that hope away. It is done. Those so-called moderate Democrats will agree to everything that the rich and the powerful want: tax cuts for the rich, oil subsidies for the oil companies, almost no regulations for the banks, because they're bought. They're just as bought as the Republicans. Honestly, there's like, I don't know, 3 politicians, I don't know, it's certainly only a handful in the country who are honest. One of them is Bernie Sanders. Other than Bernie Sanders, I'm stretching, man. I mean, I guess Al Franken. Feingold's not there anymore. Who's left? Who's left? You know, on the Republican side, we give credit to Ron Paul for being honest, and he's largely honest. I had him on the MSNBC show the other day. If you didn't catch the interview, first of all, it's on TYT interviews on YouTube. You can catch it. But second of all, I asked him, what do you think the income tax rate should be? He said 0%. I mean, okay, the guy's earnest. He's honest. 0%. He said it worked in 1913. I don't know if I'll help Congressman Paul with the math. That was nearly 100 years ago. A little different situation today. Okay, and by the way, what he didn't tell you is what happened after 1913. We had income taxes when we were in our most prosperous time in American history. Here, I'll give you the exact numbers. Eisenhower. Oh, the 1950s. Eisenhower's a Republican. Great times. Top marginal tax rate for the top bracket, 91%. Now, that doesn't mean that all of your income gets taxed at 91%. It means that if you make over a certain percentage and you're in the top bracket, every dollar, once you've gotten past that threshold, 100,000, 200,000, a million, whatever it is, every dollar, let's say it's $1 million, every dollar over $1 million is taxed at 91%, not your whole income, right? but obviously a huge tax bracket. If you did that now, well, it's inconceivable. Kennedy, golden years of America, top bracket, 91%. Nixon, right-wing Republican, 70%. Reagan, 50%. Okay, in the beginning, and then he did a series of cuts, and then he had to do 11 tax increases because he destroyed the budget so bad, and at the end, we still had an enormous deficit. So there is another way, but we're not going to get that way until we clean up our elections. And the way you clean up elections is you do public financing of campaigns, because the politicians are going to get bought one way or another. It might as well be us that's paying them rather than the campaign contributors, because it's going to cost us a hell of a lot less to just simply pay for their campaigns than if they have to do favors for the companies that paid for their campaigns. That, as you can see, over and over again, that costs so much more. And now don't be like, don't think that I don't get that it's not just that simple. I know there's a whole number of other things you'd have to do. You could still have money pouring in other ways, and you would have to do the Disclose Act to see if other people are going to spend money in politics. At least we should know who they are. They shouldn't be able to do it anonymously. The other way that they do it is after they retire, they become lobbyists or consultants or advisors, and they get paid millions of dollars. That's an unofficial bribe. I would end that too. But let's start with public financing of campaigns. And the second really important thing is we must stop corporate personhood. Corporations are not human beings. They do not have First Amendment rights. They use those so-called First Amendment rights to buy our entire political and military system. We have to put an end to that. Now you say, well, what can we do? The Supreme Court ruled in Citizens United. It's a right-wing court. We have no choice. That's not true. There is something else. It's called a constitutional amendment. The Constitution is above the Supreme Court. They can't change the Constitution. But we can. We're the American people. There is a system. I know it's very hard. But you know what makes it a little easier? You can go state by state. Now remember, 3/4 of the states have to ratify a new amendment, right? Let's start in Vermont. Why not? Let's start in Wisconsin. Let's start. Let's get it started, okay? And then we'll see where it ends. But you know, the thing is, two interesting things can happen if you start that movement. One, you never know where momentum takes. I'm sure that before they started the protests in Wisconsin, or even before they started the protests in Egypt, there were a lot of skeptics and a lot of doubters. You know, we're going to be able to maintain, this protest against Governor Walker, who's, so adamant and who just won election, and they control the House and the Senate in Wisconsin, the Republicans do. What can we do? Well, those doubters were wrong in the sense that those guys started a protest that wound up, one, showing how strong the American people can be and what a difference it can make. Number two, it wound up having an effect in other states. Indiana, which was going to take away collective bargaining rights from private unions, stopped dead in their tracks. New Jersey and Florida, who were considering taking away collective bargaining from public employees, stopped dead in their tracks because some people in Wisconsin thought it was possible to make a difference. And they were right. Even if they lose the battle in Wisconsin, they won it for other states. Now, number two, when you start the movement for a constitutional amendment to say corporations are not human beings, they don't have First Amendment rights. There's nothing wrong as long as we keep checks on it, as long as we don't let them run amok and buy everything, including our government and our politicians. So how do we do that check? Corporations are not human beings. You start that, you know who's going to agree with you? Conservatives. Vermont might be the first state to do it, and I'm just throwing that out there. Utah might be the second state to do it, because a lot of the Tea Party people agree with you. That's the one note of agreement. The politicians are bought. Great. Then let's shake on it and let's do an amendment that say that these corporations and the rich and the powerful cannot buy our politicians. We have to stop corporate personhood. All right. Now, to give you another example of that before we take the break, Governor Bobby Jindal has done a cute little scam. Now, if you're giving to Governor Jindal's campaign, well, that there are, rules that limit that. Direct campaign contributions are only $5,000 a person per election cycle. So now people want to get contracts from the state, so they want to influence the governor, but they can only give $5,000, so it prevents them from buying him more effectively. So how do they find a way around that? Well, they decided, hey, why don't I give it to the governor's wife instead? She runs a charity, a non-profitable charity, and 9 companies that are looking to get help from the Louisiana government just coincidentally happen to give $790,000 to her charity. Now, one, that winds up helping her with if she takes a salary from the charity, whoever else takes salaries from the charity. And number 2 is just something that apparently they care about, I hope, so that's a good thing, but it pleases them. They're very happy to get that money, right? For good reasons, bad reasons, whatever reasons you want to give it. I don't know their motivations, right? But obviously they're ecstatic about getting $790,000. And it turns out, well, you look at that. 8 of the 9 companies have received contracts from the state of Louisiana after Governor Jindal became governor. And they received $113 million in state payments. You see how that works? You give $5,000 to the governor, you give about $800,000 to the governor's wife's charity, and you get back $113 million. Now, that's an awesome return on investment. In fact, if you're a corporation and you're not buying politicians, you're an idiot. Okay, you should look into it right away. It's the best investment you can make in America. Now, look, they'll argue some of those companies might have gotten the contracts anyway. Okay, it was just convenient that they gave the money and then they got the money back, et cetera, right? But does it have an appearance of impropriety? Of course. And you think Jindal's the only one? It's just the latest example. It's the example that came out today. But Orrin Hatch's son gets paid a tremendous amount of money to be a lobbyist. And then he doesn't do it directly, but his company lobbies Orrin Hatch, who happens to always agree with his son's lobbyist company. Funny how that works. Norm Coleman's wife, the ex-senator from Minnesota, she went to work at a company paying her an extraordinary amount of money. Reports are from inside the company, from inside sources. She never showed up for a day of work. She doesn't even know anything about that field of work. They hired her to funnel money to the Coleman family. That's how it works. And you go down the line, you look at Democratic wives. Evan Bayh's wife, Democrat from Indiana, recently retired. Huge amount of money from lobbying. Former Senator Phil Gramm from Texas, his wife, hired by the banks. A huge amount of money to the Graham family. And what did Senator Graham do? Oh, he deregulated the banks. Golly gee willikers, what a coincidence. And then what happened after Senator Graham retired? He got hired for many millions of dollars by the banks. Wild coincidence. So you see what I'm saying? Yeah, I know there's a ton of ways to buy the politicians. You could buy them from the campaign contributions. You could do it by spending indirect money on ads in their race without consulting with them, which is what the Coke Industries does now, and which is what Citizens United allows for. And then you could buy them after they retire with a wink and a nod. And by the way, the thing that almost never gets talked about in the media is how all of our generals are bought, okay? Because there is a huge wink and a nod at the Pentagon. If you lard up the Pentagon budget with all this weaponry we don't need, then you're going to get a really healthy contract from a defense contractor as soon as you retire General X. And General X plays ball, and General Y, and General Z. And if a general doesn't play ball, he's in the minority, and he gets ignored, or he gets demoted, or whatever, and he has no effect. And all the other generals are looking to get rich. Yeah, oh, I know. You're not supposed to say anything about the generals. That's sacrosanct. How dare you, right? It's, in media, they're like, oh, my God, they are the generals. No, they're the generals. They're human beings. They worked up a bureaucracy. Some of them had tremendous bravery in battle. Some of them, gave good service to our country for a long time. It's not to say they're all corrupt. It's just that the system is set up wrong. If you set up a system where you say to a guy, hey, you know what? If you play ball, I'm going to give you $1 million. Or, over the course of your so-called retirement, many millions of dollars. If you don't play ball, I'm going to give you nothing. You can't expect a guy to say nothing. You just can't. It's human nature to take the millions of dollars. We have to change the system. Okay, now now let's work towards changing it. All right, let's take a quick break and come back and tell you the other news of the day.
Welcome back to TYT. Anna and Cenk with you. All right, let's get right to the nitty-gritty. So BYU University, Brigham Young University, has just suspended one of their star basketball players. And the reason why they did that is because it came to their attention that he had sex with his girlfriend. Okay. So they said that he broke the moral code of the university and that it's unacceptable, so they've suspended him for the rest of the season. He is very remorseful, and he says that he's heartbroken. His name is Brandon Davies, by the way. And he says that he has accepted the punishment.
Yeah, good for him. I like young kids who are responsible and who understand the severity of their crime. I'm repulsed by the crime and transgression that he has committed here against the school. I know it's not a crime in the outside world, but at BYU, to have sexual relations when you're a young man in college, how dare he?
I know, it's despicable. I can't believe it. By the way, I just want to bring this to your attention. So Brigham Young University is the same university that released that study a couple months ago claiming that people who have premarital sex are less happy than people who remain virgins until marriage. And then when I said that study is biased, people are like, "Oh, why is it biased? Why do you think it's biased, huh? Why is it biased?" This is why it's biased, okay? Because they have a strict code on remaining virgins until marriage within their university. I mean, it's something they obviously really believe in and something that they really want to push upon people. So here it is.
No, Anna, I think this story actually proves you wrong. See, he had premarital sex. Now that he's kicked off the basketball team, he's much less happy, just like the study says.
He's heartbroken.
All right, listen, BYU is a Mormon school. I know why they have the strict code. It's, I think, wildly counterproductive. Right now, any top recruit in the country is thinking, under no circumstances should I go to BYU to play basketball. That's certainly what I'd be thinking if I was a senior in high school and they're trying to recruit me. What? You're telling me I'm going to go play basketball at a top program, and at this point, BYU is ranked number 3 in the country, which doesn't happen that often, but they are at this point. And as a result, I'm going to get no sex? No, the whole point of being at a basketball program at a top school is to get a lot of sex. Okay, hell no. Would I go to BYU? No way. I think that they're going to, I think it's going to hurt all their programs. I think you're crazy to go to BYU if they don't want you to have sex there. What's the point of college? Hell no.
What's the point of college?
No, I'm being serious. Look, I know you're supposed to get an education. I got an education. It's fine. But you're also supposed to have the time of your life. I'm not kidding around. Look, I got nephews. One's in college, one's about to go. And I tell them, it's really important you get good grades. It sets you up. It's important you do good internships, et cetera, et cetera. It's also important that you have time.
Wait, repeat that again, Cenk. You broke up a little bit.
I said it's also important that you have a freaking awesome time, because that's what college is for. And look, when you get into the working world, there's going to be plenty of time to be a responsible, hardworking citizen and do 2 shows, one in the morning, one at night, and spend 18 hours a day working. Enjoy college while you can. Don't go to BYU. Fuck no.
Yeah, so Brandon Davies is actually getting calls from other recruiters from other universities who want to bring him on. And I really hope he takes their offer. Can you imagine if he just stays at BYU, suspended for the rest of the season, upset that he had sex with his girlfriend? What a waste of a life.
You know what? One last thing. I don't know why he confessed. I'm sure there are more details to this story. I don't know. Look, I don't want to speculate, right? But if he just felt remorseful and told his coach, then he deserves it. He had it coming. Because what an unbelievably dumb confession. It's, in fact, the worst and most ridiculous and needless confession in the history of man. My guess is that's not what happened, that he was forced into that confession because of the circumstances. But listen, whether you were forced into it or not, here's what's unacceptable. Don't be remorseful. That's ridiculous to be remorseful. I hope you just put that out as a PR statement and don't mean a word of it.
All right, let's go to the next sex-related university story. So Northwestern University has a very popular sexual education class, and it's taught by Professor John Michael Bailey, and he often has after-school demonstrations and discussions and lectures. Just to, give the students a little more if they decide they want to attend these after-school things. Well, it turns out that he's in a little bit of trouble because the last activity that he had the students come watch was a woman, naked woman, who was getting sexually stimulated by a sex toy.
Anna, you want to tell me what the name of that sex toy was?
I don't remember, Cenk. Do you remember what the name of it was?
No, I hope you have it in front of you.
You're the worst. The name of the sex toy is the fuck saw. Okay? So I think that's a little vulgar. Okay? Vulgar name for the toy. As you can see it on
really?
the screen, it doesn't look particularly fun. But the woman who was using it seemed to enjoy it during the demonstration. That's what I've heard.
that's what the reports were, literally. And apparently it works by, well, you know where to put it. And then it goes back and forth like a saw, and hence the term of the vibrator at hand.
Uh-huh. Jeez. Okay.
So, of course, once this hits the papers, the professor's in a world of trouble, the dean's in a world of trouble, everybody has to react, etc. Was it a good idea to employ the fuck saw in front of students? I know it's a human sexuality class, but honestly, Anna, I probably wouldn't have gone there.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, here's the thing. I'm all for the human sexuality classes. In fact, when I was going to a community college during high school, I took one. And it was really interesting. Like, I liked the discussions, and I liked all the things that you learn and whatever, right? But, like, here's the thing. You really need to make a case for why you're doing this, right? I'm not taking his class. I've read a million articles on this trying to figure out, what the context was, what was his whole motivation behind doing this, what was he trying to teach the students, right? And I couldn't find anything. I mean, you have to make a case. If you make a case, then okay, that's fine. I don't necessarily have any problem with nudity in class. I know that some human sexuality professors actually play porn in class. I don't have a problem with that. But you just have to have a reason for it, okay? And as soon as you explain what the reason is, then we can judge whether or not it was acceptable. And look, I also want to give him a little tiny bit of credit, because it's not like this happened during the regular class. He let the students know what was going to happen. He gave them ample warning. It happened after class. The students knew what they were getting themselves into. So I read a couple blogs from some of the people who are taking his class, and all of them are defending him. They're like, what the hell? This is one of the most awesome classes I took. Everybody get off his ass, So.
Right. Okay, listen, here's the thing. I want to be clear. Number one, I think that he should not be fired for it. I don't want people to get that wrong. I think that this is within the purview of, a professor experimenting in class. This wasn't a calculus class. It was a human sexuality class. At the same time, if I was the dean, I'd be like, hey, dude, let's bring that down a notch, right? And hopefully that they're smart enough to make that adjustment, right, without anybody getting fired or anything. I mean, that's the whole point of tenure, is that you want them to try different things. Well, I'm not sure the whole point of tenure is the fuck saw, but you see my point. Right. Now, when I took human sexuality at Penn, yeah, we had a fun teacher, and we did a lot of different things, and we watched porn. We came in, I believe, on a Saturday, and we all got comfortable and cozy in a dark room. I'm not kidding. And I remember and I was like, oh, porn day is awesome. I was like 19 or 20 or whatever it was. And first video is from the 1970s. It's of a hairy dude going to work on himself.
Oh my God.
And I'm like, no, poor dude, not what's supposed to be. Okay. And I mean, the dude was having fun. He's like, I'm like, no, please, right? And then, what do you call it? And then they're like, all right, now a woman goes to work on herself. I was like, all right, now we're getting better. And it's from the 1970s. It was like a forest in there. I'm like, Jesus. I can't even see through the Amazon. What's going on, right? Anyway, it's fine. And then she's like, oh, now it's time for the gay sex porn. And I was like, remember, I'm a kid. Da, da, da. And she's like, oh, she's looking through her porn, and she's looking through the collection. She's like, damn, I forgot that one. And I was like, for the win. And she's like, oh, but luckily I have the lesbian one. I'm like, oh, come on, it doesn't get any better than this. And then the lesbian one was like a hot blonde chick and a hot black chick. And it was like the best 1970s porn I've ever seen. And they're in a bathtub and they're washing each other. And I was like, Yeah, human sexuality 101 FTW.
I love how this story devolved into Cenk's porn, like from when he was in college. I love it. By the way, is that the class where the professor talked about circle jerks?
No, no, that was my health class back in like 8th grade.
What? Really?
Or, no, it might have been 10th grade. I think it was 10th grade.
Okay.
Okay, so no, not 8th, 10th grade. That was Miss Pondgrass. She's like, yeah, you know, when you all sit around and do circle jerks, yeah. Like, what? Oh, by the way, in that human sexuality class, after we watched the lesbian porn, it was funny. I said it was 101. It really wasn't. It was actually a graduate level class. It was in the School of Social Works. And so there was all these social workers, and they were a little older, right? And a couple of women came back after the lesbian porn, and they were like, not kidding. They're like, ooh, that one got me worked up. I didn't think I was going to be that interested in it. It's really quite interesting. And I was like, was it?
All right. What college was this class in? Was it a Penn?
Yeah, it was a Penn.
Oh, okay.
Penn has like 1 million schools. That's why I finally got ranked higher because they're like, oh, there's like 78 different schools and 74 of them are ranked #1, right? Now it's like nursing, we're ranked #1 in nursing, whatever. But in business school, etc., who cares about Penn? But the bottom line is, since it has all these schools, you can take classes in all these different categories that are so wildly different. So that's why I could take the class in social works with a bunch of social workers, and I could take a class in philosophy in a totally different department with like graduate level philosophy students, and it was great in a lot of ways. That's when I realized like I'm not really that interested in my own major, which was my major was entrepreneurial management and political science, so that worked out. I was in business school undergraduate, and then like I'm like, okay, would I rather take an accounting class or philosophy or human sexuality? Accounting for the loss. I hated that class.
Man,
See what I'm saying?
you're making me miss college. I miss
Yeah.
that. Just not having to work, going class to class, learning whatever you want to learn. It was fun. But anyway, okay, enough of college. We got to get to the fat clause in divorces. Okay, this is the story that I've been teasing for 2 days now. So Vicky Larson from Huffington Post wrote this really, really interesting piece on how more and more people are putting a fat clause in their prenuptial agreements. And basically what that fat clause would indicate is if you gain 40 pounds within the marriage, then that is grounds for a divorce, right? So the couples are working it out. They're trying to figure out what type of weight gain is acceptable, what type of body image they want one another to maintain, that type of thing. And if one person ends up gaining the weight and the other person doesn't like it, then bam, violation of the prenup, we want a divorce.
You know, Anna, I like how you made it gender neutral. The reality is, of course, is if the wife gains weight, then you're done. There's almost no clauses where if the guy gains weight, they're done.
Yeah, I mean, I could see that, but you know, the reason why I like this story is because I think I have a controversial stance on it, okay? I actually am not opposed to the fat clause, okay? And I'm not saying like, oh, if my husband ends up gaining 20 pounds, we're done, right? But I definitely want to have some sort of agreement that we're both going to live like healthy lifestyles. And I'm not going to be like Madonna and be like a food Nazi and be like, you're eating a donut. Oh my God, I got to give you a B12 shot. I'm not going to do that, you know? But I'm saying like, I like the idea that, you know, just because we're in a marriage now doesn't mean that you just let yourself go and get extremely comfortable, because that type of lifestyle translates into a lot of other things that could ruin the marriage. Like, for instance, if you let yourself go, all of a sudden the sex life isn't great. If the sex life isn't great, you start to resent one another. You start getting annoyed with one another. And then all of a sudden the marriage deteriorates. I think that having agreements like this isn't necessarily a terrible thing.
No, disagree. Now, here's why. It's not that your idea overall isn't right. Of course it's right. You know, you shouldn't let yourself go, and you should have really frank conversations about that. But you shouldn't make it into a contractual agreement. That's crazy. If you sign a prenup saying, you went 20 pounds over, that's it. Sad day for you. I'm divorcing you for someone hotter, plus you get no money. Or however the prenup is signed. No, it's absurd, right? And in reality, that's not how it works, and that's not how a relationship goes anyway. I mean, unless it's I think in my opinion, a terrible relationship where you're weighing your wife or you're weighing your husband and watching everything, and then she has to report and be within her contract. It's freaking crazy. That's going to end up in a divorce anyway. Sounds like a terrible marriage.
No. I see what you're saying. And I guess what I'm trying to get at is, like, first of all, in my own marriage, would I put that in a prenup? Of course not. Like, I think a prenup does go too far, but I'm talking about the theory behind it, and I do agree with the theory behind it. I do agree that you should have those conversations and you should be frank about it. And, you know, one way that, and JR and I talk about this all the time, actually, like what our fears are when we get married, and he says like he wants to maintain a healthy lifestyle with his wife, and I want the same thing. Like, that's very important to us. And one way that you could determine whether or not that's going to happen is to have those conversations before you get married, right? So, and really like take a step back and take a look at the way your relationship is before you get married. Are you guys physically active together regularly? I know. You think I'm full of shit because I'm 24 and I'm not married, but that's the way that I want to approach marriage. I want to make sure that I know what I'm getting myself into.
Look, God bless your heart, right? And I hope you do. But here's one thing you're not factoring in: pregnancy. You have no idea how hard it is to lose weight after a pregnancy. Doesn't mean you can't do it. Doesn't mean people don't do it all the time. Doesn't mean you shouldn't try hard. But and the other thing you're not factoring in is age. After a certain time, it becomes really hard to lose weight because your metabolism changes, especially if you've had 2-3 pregnancies. Yeah, then all of a sudden, oh yeah, ooh, I made a commitment. Yeah, okay, but it's a little hard, right? And the other part of it is, look, I get that sometimes people get comfortable. Don't get me wrong, right? Like in the story that we started with. The wife gained 40 pounds, and the husband was mad. Their sex life suffered, etc. And she said, "I can't lose it." And then they got divorced, and lo and behold, since she was single and back on the market, she lost it. Mm-hmm. Right? So don't get me wrong. I get the other side of it. If you have the proper motivation, like, hey, you know what? I'm back out in the singles market, and all of a sudden you find a way to lose that weight. So, and I've seen it, by the way, in my life. Not just with women, but definitely with men. Once they get divorced, all of a sudden they're going to the gym and they're in 10 times better shape. So I agree with you that you got to fight that, but at the same time you can't be draconian.
No, I agree with that as well. But I do like having those conversations. I think that it makes sense. So, and I like being candid about it as well. Like I think that in too many cases, both individuals are afraid to share what they really think, right? They don't want to hurt one another's feelings. Like, screw the feelings. Like, let's be honest with one another. Like, that's the way I like it. So, I don't know.
Okay.
All right, let's take...
Stone Cold Kasparian.
Look, because the worst thing is suppressing what you really feel, and then all of a sudden you blow up, you know? Like, all of a sudden... your significant other is, 50 pounds overweight, and you're like, I'm sick of you being overweight, I'm going to leave you. That's not the way to handle it either. So.
It's true. At the risk of getting way too deep into relationship talk, one last quick thing. That's what I used to do. But I would be super nice to my girlfriends, and they thought I was like the best boyfriend in the world. But then I realized later that I was secretly building up resentment, like that I didn't watch football on Sunday or whatever it was. And then one day, randomly, I'd walk in and be like, we're done. And they'd be like, what? Why are we done? I thought everything was lovely. Because I had built up all this resentment instead of actually communicating that and getting to a better place in the relationship.
Yeah, that's not the way to go. All right.
You know what? Mm-hmm. This entire Young Turks story has been an education in life.
It really has. That's the tone of the show today. All right, we got to take a break. When we come back, I want to talk about a new camera that automatically adjusts your face so you look better. And then a study on how Facebook helps us with our self-esteem issues. All right, that story and more on the Young Turks.